Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the session of the CIC National Capital Branch entitled The Transatlantic Relationship and Rethinking Its Prospects in the Post-COVID Era. My name is Elizabeth Kingston, and I am the president of the National Capital Branch of the CIC. I'm delighted to introduce to you our most distinguished panel to take up this topic. I'm also delighted that Ben Rowswell will act as moderator. Her Excellency Sabine Sparwasser has been the ambassador of Germany to Canada since 2017. Previously, she was posted to the EU mission in Brussels, as well as the German embassies in London and San Jose, Costa Rica. She also served as Consul General in Toronto. Before coming to Canada as ambassador in 2017, she was Assistant Deputy Minister for Africa, Asia, Latin America, Near and Middle East, and also Germany's Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Welcome, Your Excellency. The Honorable Stéphane Dion is Canada's ambassador to Germany and Special Envoy to the European Union and Europe. Prior to his current appointment, Monsieur Dion was Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs from November 2015 until January 2017. He was previously Minister of the Environment from 2004 to 2005, and in 2005 chaired the United Nations Conference on Climate Change. He was Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs between 1996 and 2003, where he played a primary role in promoting Canadian unity. In 2006, he was elected leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and became the leader of the official opposition in the Canadian House of Commons, a position he held until 2008. Welcome, Ambassador Dion. The Honorable Peter Boehm was appointed to the Senate of Canada in October 2018 and was recently elected as chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Congratulations, Senator. A former career Foreign Service officer, he served as ambassador to Germany, minister at the Embassy of Canada to the United States, as well as ambassador to the Organization of American States. He is a former Deputy Minister of International Development, Senior Associate Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Assistant Deputy Minister for the Americas, North America, and Consular Affairs. He served several prime ministers as their Sherpa for the G8 and G7 summits, as well as for the summits of the Americas and nuclear security summits. Most recently, he was a deputy minister and personal representative of the prime minister for the G7 summit held in Quebec in June of 2018. Welcome, Senator Boehm. Our moderator, Ben Rowswell, has been president and research director of the Canadian International Council since November 2018. Prior to the CIC, Ben served as Canada's ambassador to Venezuela from 2014 to 2017. This capped a 25-year career as a professional diplomat, including assignments in Canada's embassies to Egypt, the United States, and in Canada's permanent mission to the United Nations. While in Ottawa, Ben supported the cabinet process as a member of the Privy Council office during the tenures of Jean Chrétien and Stephen Harper. These experiences have exposed him to the far-reaching impact that public opinion has on our decision-making at the highest levels of government. Ben brings that passion for the role of individual citizens to the CIC, a platform for everyday Canadians to participate in the national conversation about our nation's role in the world. Thank you very much, Ben, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and to all the National Capital Branch for conceiving this event and inviting and securing the participation of some very high caliber panelists. Hats off to Vic and Kundakshan, a former colleague of Peter's and mine in the Foreign Service, whose idea was Hamid Georgiani, the Director of Planning, and of course to you, Elizabeth, as the branch president. I'll just start with a little bit of context before I turn to our first speaker to situate today's conversation with Joe Biden's eventual, we think, victory as in the election and coming in as the 46th president of the United States. There's a lot of talk about reinvigorating the transatlantic relationship. Joe Biden is a transatlanticist. He has written extensively about his plans to strengthen the relationship between liberal democracies and with a focus on Europe in particular. And it comes at a time that Canada has been casting about in the public debate with ideas about how we need to reinforce our relationships with other liberal democracies. There's discussions in the pages of Open Canada just this last week about some renewed relationship between Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. There's discussions about Asian democracies. And of course, the original club of liberal democracies is the one that spans the Atlantic Ocean, formed in the wake of the Second World War, but then reaching out to include Germany in the aftermath of that war. I think one thing that's not often known as we talk about the transatlantic relationship is what began as a US-UK initiative became transatlantic with the addition of two countries, Canada, which was involved by the United States and the United Kingdom in the very beginning to ensure that this emerging group would be considered a community and not just a binary relationship between two then very powerful countries. And then Germany, the transatlantic relationship did not become genuinely transatlantic until Germany was admitted in full effect in the late 40s and early 50s. That formed the basis of arguably the most successful community of nations in the history of mankind. Now, with a spread of power across the world, it's quite frequent to say, well, we need to look beyond the transatlantic to others areas of the world. And that certainly is true, but there's something about the bond that we have between Canada, the United States, and the European Union countries, with Germany playing a foremost role that has been absolutely central to our foreign policy all along, and where there's room for growth going forward. I believe that the discussion of the United States tends to dominate so many of these conversations. With the recent addition of a free trade agreement between Britain and Canada, there's a lot of discussion about the role that Britain and Canada needs to play. But today, I hope that we can offer greater focus on a relationship that I think has been traditionally and can be a real driver of that transatlantic unity, and that's the relationship between Canada and Germany. It's in our nation, in the nature of both of our nations and our political culture as Canadians and as Germans, not to talk so much about our own countries and our own national power, but to build clubs and to work with others. And so that's why I think often we don't devote as much attention to the great similarity between our two countries and our tremendous mutual capacity to bring other liberal democracies in alignment with us and to share that the greater influence that we can by building those clubs. But that's the conversation I'm looking forward to having today. We're very lucky to have the two ambassadors for those two countries on the line, and so I'll start with Germany's representative here in Ottawa, Ambassador Sabine Sparwasser. Over to you, Ambassador.
I hope you can hear me. I hope I unmuted myself. Great. Thank you so much, Ben, for this kind sort of introduction and pushing into the issue. And thank you so much to the CIC and to Elizabeth for having invited us. You obviously picked the hot subject of the moment. In all our ministers' offices, in all our planning divisions, we're now sitting there and thinking about the reset of the transatlantic relation, Transatlantic 2.0. And obviously what we mean, especially when you sit in Berlin, you really rethink the relationship, in particular with the US, because we all in Germany, and I think many people also in Canada, breathed a sigh of relief in November, a double sigh of relief when Joe Biden was elected president of the United States, and when we had news of vaccines coming, so the light at the end of the tunnel on the coronavirus. So we now plan ahead, we can now think ahead, but even if we now all think about pushing that reset button, I think we need to be aware there is no going back to the status quo ante in this new transatlantic relationship. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is we have to understand that the US behavior, the US withdrawal from global leadership was not just something that happened in the last 4 years, nor is the US pivot towards Asia something temporary. China's place in the new world order is a determining factor geostrategically. It's a determining factor also for our transatlantic relationship. And also, I think when you look at the transatlantic relationship, we have to be aware we can't go back, because we also have seen that still 70 million people have voted to continue the Trump administration and its agenda. So we need to build maybe differently, a transatlantic relationship that is differently. And we have to also be aware that President Biden will have maybe very little room for maneuver during his tenure because of a shrunken majority in the House and maybe no majority in the Senate. So still, having said there is no going back to the status quo ante, I would say there's a huge opportunity for Germany, for the EU, and for Canada, because in maybe 3 or 4 areas, because we will be aligned again. We will be aligned again with the partner that has been so crucial and essential for us when we look together for the future of democracy, but also more importantly, when we look for the democracy of the future, when we look at subjects like how will new technologies shape public opinion? How will they shape our country and our citizens? Second reason why it's a huge opportunity, we will value each other as allies again. So we can emphasize together that the rule of law is not that might makes right. We can stop the erosion of the international order. And for Europe especially, we will have a US partner again who sees the European project as a united and positive vision, who does not actually try to undermine the European unity project. So we will be able, within this new transatlantic relationship, to work together so much more closely on the crucial subject. And if I say we, I mean the EU, Canada, and the US on a relationship, for example, with China, that respects our joint values and interests. Now, let me go. How should this new transatlantic vision 2.0 shape up? And I would argue that we need to do it very realistically on the one hand, and at the same time with a broader vision. I think one of the things I would argue for is, please, when we look at the new relationship that we're building, could we please not just focus on the US? Could we please focus on the EU, the individual countries, Canada, and not play in a way like children play soccer? The whole team runs after one ball and exhausts itself. It's much, much better if we play more strategically and actually appoint roles. We should have that kind of strategic vision. We should have a broader vision also when we look at including like-minded countries. In the last few years, we have seen that, and I'm quoting Chancellor Merkel, who, by the way, yesterday celebrated her 15 years as Chancellor. It's quite something. She famously said that the times where we could just rely on the US sind ein Stück weit vorüber, are somewhat over. So we will need to build up more sovereignty. We will need to build up more autonomy. We have seen through the pandemic that dependencies on just one partner are really what we should not allow our countries to have. This has been not good for any of us. So the new buzzword in the EU, but also in Germany, is strategic autonomy or strategic sovereignty. When we talk about the bilateral also agenda also between Canada and the EU, I think we should look at that particular buzzword in many, many areas. It could be health, it could be natural resources, it could be energy, it could be digital technology. In all of these areas, we've realized that we need to be less dependent, but that doesn't mean we need to go it alone. It means we have to build together with reliable partners. When I said earlier on that we cannot rely on the US of bailing us out all the time, it also means that in this new transatlantic relationship, Europeans and maybe Canadians too will have to take on greater responsibilities, and that includes defense and security, and obviously includes defense spending. We will have to look after the conflicts in our neighborhood more on our own and actually give ourselves the capabilities to solve them. When I look at the transatlantic agenda, a very important part is reforming and reshaping multilateralism, a multilateral international order. And again, it should be a transatlantic project, but it should be one that doesn't exclude others. We should be looking for like-minded nations who want to come along, like Japan, like Australia, like Singapore. Last point, in this transatlantic relationship, we also need to talk about our own countries and strengthening democracy in our own countries, and actually strengthen the power of reason in our own countries. But we have this opportunity now, and we should really seize it with full hands.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ambassadeur Dion, je vous invite à prendre la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Mr. Rowswell, dear Ben, and Madame Kingston, Elizabeth. And it's a great pleasure to be with Sabine and Peter and all of you. We'll say a few words in French at the beginning. La présentation va être, la discussion se passe en anglais, mais j'ai écrit mes remarques d'introduction. Je les ai écrites en anglais et en français. Donc, si vous souhaitez avoir la version française, ça me fera plaisir de vous la faire parvenir. Ça me ferait très plaisir. Since I agree with what Sabine said, I will not have to repeat her very valid points. I would like to say first that the title is The Transatlantic Relationship and Rethinking Its Prospects in the Post-COVID Era. Post-COVID era. Oh, we want to be there. The point, though, is I don't know when we will be there, but I know that we'll be there quicker if we work together and if we build our multilateralism. Because if we give in to harmful protectionism and national selfishness, it will be even more painful than it is already. And this brings us a bit to the situation with the new US administration coming in a couple of months. I think it's not the only role that Canada has to play, but the key role that Canada has to play in the world is to try to convince our American friends to use their necessary, irreplaceable leadership toward multilateralism instead of unilateralism. And you may count on Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Champagne and all the ministers to work with their counterparts in the US to try to have this drive toward multilateralism from the new administration. And in this sense, Canada has a big role to play in the coming months and years. We are a country of the Americas, close to the US, their biggest economic partner, trade partner. But we are also the most European of non-European countries, strong acquaintance with Europe, and we strengthened our acquaintance with the Pacific in the last years. So we have a duty to be sure that the leadership of the US will be as multilateral as possible. I'm personally confident about the transatlantic shape. It's true that the image of the United States is really bad today in Europe, especially and COVID made it worse, but it's a lot linked to the significant unpopularity of President Trump. President Obama is still remain a rock star in Europe, so there's a potential to see a lot of improvement, and we may expect from the new US administration a lot of changes that will really help. I will give you an example. of the kind of abrasive relationship that I don't think will happen again. The US may decide to pull some soldiers, some troops out of Germany. They did it in the past before President Trump. They may continue to do so and to say they will be more helpful in Poland or in the Baltic countries. But I'm sure that the new administration will not do it without pre-notification to the German government by surprise, and in blaming Germany to be delinquent regarding trade with the US. I don't think this kind of linkage will happen anymore. And no pre-notification to NATO, to do it by surprise for NATO. So this kind of rebuke, I think, will not happen anymore, and it will be a great help. In fact, what Europeans want from the White House is about the same than we Canadians. They want an American president who believes in multilateralism, in NATO, in arms control, in GSUPOA, in the danger of climate change, in the Paris Agreement, in the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, and in the European Union. It was a bit painful to have a president who was against the European Union. Canada, the government of Canada today strongly believe that the EU is a superb achievement for mankind. The US government and Congress and so on will continue to pressure all the members of NATO to spend more in the military, especially at a time where the US want to focus more on the Asia theater, and they will ask to do more in the Atlantic. That's, yes, it will happen, but what will not happen anymore is the kind of blackmail that if we don't do that, then the US may pull out of NATO. This, I think, will not happen anymore. We will have, again, a lot of trade tensions and protectionism coming from the US, but not anymore will they not be willing to take our resources in claiming that it would be against their national interest. That was quite a stretch to pretend that Canada and Europe are a threat to the US national security. What will continue, I think, it's the extraterritorial sanctions that the US is imposing to European and Canadian companies when we don't respect their sanctions in a country, because this is not coming only from the White House, it's coming from the Congress as well. So Sabine, I think the Nord Stream 2 disagreement between the US and Germany will continue. This kind of problems will continue. I spoke about harmful protectionism. Canada will do its best to mollify this problem. For example, it's great to have a president of the United States who's now a climate advocate, and that has been elected with the commitment to invest $2 trillion in a recovery that will be in a green recovery in the US. That's fantastic. But if it is a narrow Buy America approach, if the manufacturing and the know-how and the high tech coming from Canada and Europe cannot, and Japan and Korea and other countries cannot help the Americans to succeed in their transition toward a low carbon economy, that would be very sad for the environment, for the economy, and we need to avoid that at any cost. About China, just a point about China, I think it's important to convince our US friends that we need their leadership to assemble together democracies, to have a counterweight facing China. We need a US president that will be firm, collegial, working with others, not only thinking to sell his Kelowna to China and not working with other countries, and to be pragmatic and consistent. We will not have a full decoupling with China. It's not possible. It's completely unrealistic. Anyway, Japan, Korea, and the other allies we have in Asia will not do it. So it would be a decoupling between the West and Asia. We don't want that. So we need to find a way to deal with China all together in a realistic way, taking into account that we are speaking of a market, middle-class market of 550 million people in 2022. That will be pretty big. My last point in this introductory remarks, I think we have an opportunity to try. No, we need to try, but an opportunity to succeed, to make some progress regarding arms control. Whatever is the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the GCPOA, the lethal autonomous weapons systems, to avoid the expiration of the New START in 2021, to make some progress for the entry to force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and starting at last the negotiations for the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty. With the new US administration, Europeans and Canadians need to work very closely together to make progress. So Ben, this is where I see the continuity and the changes and the opportunities for all of us.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to Senator Boehm in Ottawa.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you to the Canadian International Council for the invitation. The advantage of going third, of course, is that the two ambassadors have really covered the ground well, and I agree with what they've said. Nonetheless, I'd like to make a few observations, and I think we still don't know what the overarching implications of this pandemic are. What they will be. And I would suggest that we are at an inflection point on the planet the way we were in 1918, again in 1945, and much more so than 2008, 2009 with the last economic crisis. This will have implications not just for health and the economies, but for education in the way that donor countries handle their development assistance. And I think that's going to be with us for some years. So this is a galvanic moment, and whether this is the impetus that's required to update and reform our multilateral institutions that have been serving us reasonably well since 1945 will remain to be seen. So that is my first observation. The second is that we are looking at changing global power structures, and I think with the election of President of Joe Biden. The U.S. is probably going to go to a bit of an introspective phase, simply because of the great divisions that Sabine Sparwasser mentioned at the beginning, and there might be some hesitancy in geostrategic terms, and maybe some modified isolationism. And Ambassador Dion touched on that when he said that Canadian industry and enterprises all over the world might find that Buy American is going to impact what they're doing and what their bottom line is. So the U.S. has to be, I think, convinced a little bit more that getting back into the multilateral swing of things, and I'm thinking particularly the WTO, is important. But going back all that distance to where they were before, and before there were problems as well under Obama and previously, that might be just a little step too far. They might go a bit more slowly than we think. Russia is going to continue its irredentism in terms of its former territories. We're seeing that in Nagorno-Karabakh as well, where we now have Russian peacemakers or peacekeepers, I should say, on the ground, and particularly with China. And Ambassador Dion made the point very well that what is required there is more of a united front in looking at things. I can say that for Charlevoix in 2018, we were actually working on a mechanism where we could be looking at steel oversupply, where we could be working together to advise the others of potential investment takeovers and things by China. We were really this close, and then the U.S. decided to go nuclear on all of us and impose tariffs on our steel and then aluminum. So that's that wasn't good. I wanted to, just on transatlanticism, my third point. We have all the tools out there. If you go back to the North Atlantic Treaty, the Canadian article, so-called Article 2, 1949, was all about NATO being more than just a military alliance. It was to have political and economic consultation as well. And we've been trying for many years. There was a third option in the 1970s under Pierre Trudeau, and of course now we have two instruments. We have the CETA, which everyone focuses on, and then we have the SPA, which no one focuses on, which is the Strategic Partnership Agreement, and that is a a mechanism that's an agreement that's 41 pages long, and that covers everything. Everything can fall under that. Counterterrorism, artificial intelligence, where we've really made some strides. So everything we need is already there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel or set up new mechanisms. We just have to use what we have and take advantage of the best in several generations bilateral relationship that we have with France, for example, and the ongoing great relationship we have with Germany, where we can compare notes. How can we compare notes? We're both federalist states. And in the pandemic context, the Länder have to work with the Bundesregierung, just like the provinces have to work with the federal government. So it's all there. My fourth point is fit for purpose. What this pandemic has done is shown us that there are other ways to consult, other ways to work together without necessarily traveling somewhere. And so we have to ask ourselves in Canada, do we really need $3 billion plus worth of real estate internationally in terms of making our global presence felt? Can we be more effective in other ways? And I think other countries are going to be looking at this as well. And this will have, I think, the fit for purpose look. It has implications for the IFIs, for the World Bank, for the IMF, and for the way that we will be doing our development assistance, because we want to make sure that those most in need, whether we're contributing to the COVAX initiative or not, can get what they need to get out of this pandemic in health and in economic terms. My last point is on realpolitik. I don't know how many times I sat in Berlin or at the Munich Security Conference in a big discussion with very intelligent and powerful people talking about the transatlantic relationship, and my country was never mentioned once. So we have to get out there and say, okay, so if we are 10% of the population of the United States, if we are 10% of the GDP, which is also more or less true, if at an international summit, President Biden needs 1,000 hotel rooms, and Justin Trudeau needs only 100, that's 10% as well. So why not talk about Canada 10% of the time that you're talking about the transatlantic relationship? For heaven's sake, give us a break. But another aspect of realpolitik as well is Angela Merkel's done 15 years. Sabine, she's not going to do another 15. She's indicated she will step down. Germany is going into elections in September. We in Canada are in a minority government situation that narrows the focus a lot. There are other things that we can do. We have all kinds of good relationships at ministerial level, as Ambassador Dion will recall. And we can do this in the context of the strategic partnership agreement, but there is a lot we have to do to push. That includes parliamentary diplomacy. I chair the Canada-Germany Parliamentary Friendship Association. We had a meeting this past week. It went very well. We're going to do more and more of that. So I think if we look at the realpolitik, bringing along the US will be important. Brexit is a factor. As we do more with the UK outside of the EU, the UK has already said they want to look across other oceans. That means that Australia and New Zealand beckon. And as Sabine said, there's Singapore, there's South Korea. There are others where we can have like-mindedness that is a little bit larger, but with that nexus of the transatlantic relationship still there. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Senator. So my initial observations just on hearing the three presentations that each of you have made, there are actually some points of disagreement, mostly agreement, but a little bit of a disagreement on the degree to which we can expect there to be change with the advent of a Biden administration. But I'm also quite taken by Ambassador Sparwasser's metaphor of all the countries reacting to the United States being akin to a group of kindergarten kids all chasing the ball and not sticking to their positions and not looking potentially, if I can draw the metaphor out, not looking to the larger advantages of approaching things strategically so that you can actually win the soccer match or the football match. There does seem to be common agreement between the three of you that this is a moment of great change in the international power structure and in the geopolitics of the moment, that this is a moment of real concern, perhaps even peril for our countries. And the transatlantic relationship has traditionally been an instrument for Canada to play and to exercise some influence at that broader geostrategic role that may be lost, certainly much diminished. We take Senator Boehm's observation that Canada is almost never mentioned in these conversations on the transatlantic relationship when they happen outside of Canada's soil. And I suppose the question I'd like to turn to all three of you for would be what would be necessary to change that? What would Canada need to do in order to get more notice within the transatlantic relationship, help work with our transatlantic allies, not just Washington, not just London, not just Paris, but with Berlin, with Brussels, and this tremendous community of liberal democracies. They're not the only liberal democracies in the world, but boy, are they ever important ones. If we did want to have that greater influence in the shape of the international power structure that's emerging right now. I might start with Ambassador Dion, if I may. Ambassador Sparwasser has identified a emerging German agenda for transatlantic 2.0. There's been quite a lot of thinking within Berlin about what it wants to get out of the relationship, and not just with the United States, but more broadly with Canada and others. I'd like to ask Ambassador Dion if there's a similar or reciprocal agenda that Canada brings to this moment of new opportunity in the transatlantic relationship after years and years of Canada focusing more on Asia or on the Americas, 4 years in which the United States has not been a productive player. We now have a moment to potentially reset that. Is there a transatlantic 2.0 agenda coming out of Ottawa that Canada is bringing to these conversations with the new President Biden, with the new Chancellor who will take over from Merkel at some point to come?
European leaders have been quite impressed by the way Canada dealt with President Trump and has been able to negotiate a trade agreement that is roughly the same than before without too much damage. They're a bit jealous that we have been able to do that, and they have a lot of respect for our skills. And that's for them to prove that we understand the US. We know it's more than a White House. It's a Congress, it's governors, it's academia, business community, students, people-to-people relationships. And that's an asset that Canada has. It's one of our assets that Europeans have a lot of respect for. The point I would like to make is the big issue once you will be able to handle COVID, and I agree with Peter that it's not done at all, and we don't know how it will be done, but the big issue will be to restore our relationship with the planet. And Canada, about clean tech technologies, is fourth in the world in the ranking, international ranking. We have a lot to offer for hydrogen, for carbon storage, and so on and so on. We have a lot to offer, and to have then concrete partnerships, not only talks and exchanging notes, something that we diplomats we like to do. But at the end of the day, you need to have results and concrete interactions with the US, with Europe, with Japan and Korea, and with the world. And Canada then will have a lot on its plate in the coming, I mean, add, but you see how much I think, for our European friends to deal with a more reliable president will be something they will enjoy a lot. But I know that they will not forget to phone Ottawa and to work with the excellent ambassador they have in Ottawa with Sabine. I don't think we will be toast in that. We'll be at the core of the debates. The Prime Minister is really determined to make sure that it is how it will happen.
I might now turn to, thank you very much for your answer, Ambassador Dion. I might turn to Ambassador Sparwasser as the only non-Canadian in the conversation today, to give us a sense of what Germans or others would look to for signals that Canada is really interested in the transatlantic relationship, of the many things that we could focus our attention on in the international arena. And we're going to be one of those kindergarten kids focused on the ball in Washington, given the centrality of the US relationship. What might Berlin be looking to from Canada for a sign that we are really focused on the transatlantic relationship itself and on and Germany? And then I might ask the same question to Senator Boehm afterwards, but I would ask both of you to unmute.
I'm unmuted. So Thank you. I wanted to go back to the point that Peter made so rightly. Canada is not mentioned enough. I think that was true. In the last few years, though, I think that attention in Germany has shifted and Canada has been mentioned more. Canada was one of the founding countries of the Initiative for Alliance for Multilateralism. Canada is a country we've looked for in many, many areas when it came to preserving the international order. And, if you were to look at whom my foreign minister calls very, very often, at the top you would probably see the French, but very close by you would see the Canadian foreign minister. But I think over my time as ambassador, and certainly Peter, looking back on his time as ambassador, and Stéphane on the last 3 years, we've always been very strong on agreeing on things, but we're not as strong on implementing then this agreement and translating it into projects. And Peter is so right to say, we have it all in CETA, we have in the strategic partnership agreement, we have set up, for example, 20 working groups on all issues, from natural resources to consular work. It's all there. But it doesn't translate necessarily into projects very fast. And this is what we need to do. This is where we need to look at it. We are at a historic transition, not just because of COVID, not just because of China and its sort of geostrategic shifting weight. We're also at a moment of total transition when it comes to climate change. We have now, after COVID, we're in deep recession. All of our countries are in deep recession. All of our countries have made huge efforts to put out enormous stimulus packages. The US will do the same. The EU has put out a stimulus package of 1.8 trillion euros. That is a number with 18 zeros at the end. That's a very, very significant historic stimulus package. And in that stimulus package, we have a lot of measures to create wealth, to help families, etc., and to help regions. But there's 1/3 of this huge amount of money that's invested into catching up on modern technologies, on things like quantum computing, on new forms of energy, on green issues, and we are putting massive, massive, massive amounts of money in it. Now, we are absolutely compatible partners. Canada, the US, and the EU, we're very, very compatible partners on working on this together and on making this big jump into not CO2 producing, CO2 neutral economies, but at the same time renovating our economies by basically buying into the new technologies, but also limit what those technologies are allowed to do to our societies. And I think that this is where enormous projects of interest are in it, in particular also in the bilateral relationship. And Stéphane has rightly mentioned the one we're all working on right now. Hydrogen is a classic case. It's a classic case. Canada has all the makings of a really important hydrogen power. Germany has decided to import hydrogen in a major way. Germany is putting 9 billion euros into developing this. We are the most attractive partner and market in this right now. We are lobbying for Canada to become our one of our preferred partners in this endeavor. That's just one particular issue.
Senator, a response?
Sure. I agree with what both ambassadors said, and Sabine, you're right. I think there's been a real upward trend in terms of the deepening of the relationships, especially with Germany. I was overstating my point, but as now I'm a politician, I can do that. You see. I wanted to add to your list of issues, artificial intelligence and just how to handle big tech, and that's another area for collaboration. I think certainly between Canada and Germany, and between Canada and the EU. And on the United States, I think a very important point, and we did not see this in the advent of the Trump administration, is for President Biden to fill his top jobs very quickly. Now, it's going to be difficult because the transition is going to be difficult, but very often as we were dealing with the new Trump administration, we didn't know which official to deal with, and either they would be there and be fired, or someone would be put in as an acting person and would not have the authority to negotiate or to deal with us directly. So if you look at today's news with John Kerry as the climate envoy, with Tony Blinken as the putative Secretary of State, il parle français aussi, you have people who have a certain amount of experience. There will be others coming forward. So that bench strength, to use a sports term, that the Trump administration did not have, it looks like Mr. Biden will have that. He, on his mother's side, has got Canadian roots. We all know about the vice president-elect having gone to high school in Montreal. So we are not unknowns. Biden, as former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, knows Canada, and he's had a lot to do with Canadians during his long Senate career as well, not to mention 2 terms as vice president. So it would behoove us, and I remember at the beginning when the Trump administration came in, Mr. Trudeau was known as the Trump whisperer to many of the Europeans, because he seemed to be able to get along and to get things done. We know how challenging that was. But as Stéphane mentioned, NAFTA, the new NAFTA, and I was the sponsor for that, the bill in the Senate, that is really a pretty good deal when you look at it compared to what it could have been had we not engaged at all those different levels. So that is something we can impart into the transatlantic relationship, is how to deal with the Americans and the American establishment, national level, subnational, and obviously through the elected representatives as well.
Great. I'd like to turn to some of the audience questions, and I will just mention to the audience, we're going to wrap this up at 4 o'clock Eastern, so in about 12 minutes. So please do get your questions in. What I'll do is I'll take the 2 that are in the Q&A. So if you could write your answer in the Q&A field that you should see at the bottom, slightly to the right of your Zoom screen. I'll take the questions from there. Let me start with one round with the 2 that we have so far. And one of them is from James Cox. He asks if Canada has the horsepower to enhance a meaningful presence in both the transatlantic and trans-Pacific regions, of course, with this greater emphasis on Asia that I think all of you have touched on. How do we prepare such a robust and future workforce to enable Canada to focus on both regions? That's one question. Second one from Vicken of the National Capital Branch. If Canada is seen as too close to the United States, which he says was apparently one of the reasons we didn't get the Security Council seat, how could the European Union partners cooperate with us in rebuilding the transatlantic relationship? I suppose the implication being so that we're not as Washington-centric, but have this diversity of bilateral relations. So first on how Canada should manage the importance of the Pacific as well as the Atlantic region, and secondly on what EU. I might this latter question seems more appropriate for Ambassador Sparwasser, so I might start with our 2 Canadians on the first question about East versus West. Perhaps start with Ambassador Dion.
Yeah, well, no, the first question, we have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Because we are a very diversified country. We have different provinces. British Columbia have its strengths, Quebec and Ontario and Atlantic Canadians in central Canada. I mean, we have also a multicultural population that is able to understand every corner of the planet. We spoke 2 official languages that are international languages, and we have the civil code and the common law. And you add all of this, and we have the ability, I think, to understand how we may push ahead our values and interest in the Asiatic theater and in Europe and the United States. Second point, we are not perceived as too close to the United States during the last years. We were perceived as very close to Europe. Europeans consider us almost as a member of the family. because they were very puzzled by what was happening in the United States. And they were counting on us to help and to explain what was happening and to find a way to deal with it. So no, I think we are perceived as Canada, not only as a kind of addition to the United States. It's well known in Europe that healthcare system or way we deal with the society is very different than the United States. The key point now that the President of the United States will be more reliable than the President wanted, a bit more eccentric and abrasive. We hope so, and it's very likely it will be the case. The key point is that Berlin and Paris and London and all the others don't forget to phone Ottawa and to be in close touch with us. And we're working on it to be sure that the good habits of the last years will continue.
Very good. Senator?
We have, in addition to what Ambassador Dion said, and I agree with him, of course, we have the CPTPP as well, and our links with the ASEAN community, which are strengthening. Some of those have important diaspora roots in Canada, when I think of Vietnam in particular, in that context. So there's a lot I think we can do on the Asia Pacific side. I think we are well represented there. We have a good network of missions and increasing amounts of dialogue. And I recall when Stéphane was the minister, he went down to the South Pacific, the Island Forum. I did that last year, pushing for the Security Council, and I was surprised and gratified by the attention that we received. We also got votes. Where we didn't get the votes from was from Europe. So, and that's partially because we're in the Western European and other group. Ben, you'll be happy to realize that 20 years ago, I argued that we should be in the Latin American and Caribbean group, the GRULAC, and I was laughed at, and might even still be laughed at today. I don't know, but there are a lot of reasons why the Security Council bid didn't work. But I would point out that in the Strategic Partnership Agreement, there's a small little section in there that says that we will coordinate our candidacies and work together in multilateral institutions in the collective sort of approach. I don't think it happened in the 2020 election to the Security Council, but maybe next time.
And Ambassador Sparwasser, particularly the question about what Canada might do to increase its profile with the European Union countries.
Oh, I think Canada has a very strong profile, and I would like to pick up a few points made by Peter and Stéphane. One, Canada does have a very strong profile as a trading nation, international trading nation, and it is it's something that's outstanding. We've seen it also now recently in the sort of with the Brexit negotiation. Canada brings for Europeans as much, I think, as for other nations, real expertise in negotiating trade agreements to the table, and that's a very interesting point for the EU as much as for others. It also has developed into quite a hub, and Peter mentioned the CPTPP. You are now part, you are probably the most interconnected country. You have the North American space, you have the European space with CETA, you have the CPTPP. So that is certainly a very important point. Canada also brings its diversity, I think, to the table, and that is a very interesting and attractive point to discuss within the EU or also with other countries. And when Stéphane said that Canada is very popular in Europe, he's so right. I mean, I only half in joke made the point at the last ambassadors conference that we had in Berlin virtually, that Canada should be an EMU member. You know, there's a space opening up, and Canada would be absolutely perfect, fitting in values, fitting in contributions. It would be perfect. So I think the issue is not that we're not very interested in each other. The issue that I see is more that we're all so busy with the crisis of the moment, and now with the transition in the US, we need to focus on each other more.
Very good. We have one other round of questions here. We've gotten quite a few, and unfortunately I won't be able to ask all of them, but I'll do it again in a round. And then just as a heads up to our three speakers, when we're done, I'll just ask for a sort of 30-second closing statement of what final message you'd like to leave with the audience. But let's go with this final round of questions from the audience. An intriguing one from Diego Osorio, who I think is joining us from the Netherlands today, so also up late. And it goes to a point that Ambassador Sparwasser hinted at, which is about the threats to domestic democracy, to our democratic experiences as like-minded countries. He asks, the political and civic polarization in the United States, and particularly after the way that the post-election process is unfolding in the US, might turn out to be a chronic element of the US political system. What can Canada and Germany do to work together and address this situation? So in other words, what can we as countries outside of the US political system do to address weaknesses in the US political system, which I think a question that wouldn't have made sense 10 or 15 years ago, but as we've seen, the erosion of democracy, even in long consolidated countries, is one that probably does demand some kind of response. Second question comes from Prince George, from the president of our new branch there, Sean Simmons, who asks, Ambassador Sparwasser spoke about Canada's strong engagement when in discussions, but difficulties in executing projects. There's consistent with other comments he's heard that we are slow as a country, or perhaps as a government. What are ways that we can get better at execution? Are there good examples where we've been able to execute more rapidly? Final question from Kokulan Mahendaran. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You've got a fascinating question. What is the hesitancy of liberal allies to support each other against political assaults from illiberal countries, say, about the practical relevance of such high-level alliances? So, for example, the lack of support that Canada received when its allies, from its allies, when Canada spoke out against human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia, and then consequently faced sanctions from Saudi Arabia, or the lack of support that Australia is receiving right now from allies after speaking out against certain actions of China. So those three quite different, quite intriguing questions. One of them was specifically oriented towards Ambassador Sparwasser, so I might start with her this time.
A good example for execution, fast execution. Well, that's very easy to find. You just look at our countries and the COVID crisis. We were able to mobilize incredible amounts of money, of action. I think we all have seen it can be done when we need to do it, when we're under sort of in an existential need. We have been able to muster enormous energy. And so I find in many ways we have no excuses anymore. We've shown what can be done. And for example, when it comes to climate change and fighting climate change, this has raised the level of expectation that we're facing. So that would be the one point. On the support for Canada being critical, or Australia being critical on China, I think we've been steadfast on, for example, the case of the two Michaels. I think Germany and the EU, by the way, has been absolutely adamant on the fact that this is against international law, and what China is doing is actually very frightening to all of its partners. And what happens to the Canadians in China, those two Canadians in China, is something that we see could well happen to all of our citizens. And so we take a very strong stand.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Dion?
Yes, I think we may sum up the questions in saying, what do we do about polarization at home? And what do we do about non-democratic regimes outside? Well, polarization is not only President Trump, it's beyond him. The polarization we see, it's a fragmentation of politics, I think, coming both in Europe and in North America and elsewhere, coming from two phenomena. The first one is the rise of the environment and climate change, especially in the ballot box. People vote about that. Some vote because they want more policies to protect our relationship with the planet, and others because they are concerned about the cost and what that means for their job and for the bill they pay for electricity. So you have a polarization, and this polarization is often concentrated in regions in a country. It's not only in Canada that it's happening, and it's dislocating a lot of the traditional party systems everywhere in Europe and in North America as well. The second reason why we have this polarization and this fragmentation of politics is identity politics. Populations are aging and they are concerned about their status. Many do not understand the world that is creating with more diversity, ethnic and religious diversity. They have difficulty to cope with that. And if a politician is telling them, we'll build a wall to protect the world, this wall will be only an abstraction, but they may vote for this kind of political appeal. And it's playing everywhere. And even in India, it's not only white Christian populations that are reacting like that. And this is also dislocating the party system in Italy, in France, in Germany, you have this kind of party as well. And in Canada, we know we are not immune. So that's two problems we need to be well aware of, and I will have a lot more to say about how to deal with all these non-democratic regimes, and we trade with them. It's not like the USSR that was not part of the economic system, but to their own choosing. They were cut with us from the economy and so on, while China is a big trade partner. But it's not a democracy, and the way they behave is something we cannot agree with. So how to deal with that, I think it will always be a debate. And when I was a minister, I've been blamed because I did not blame the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China. That's been arched in a question to a Canadian journalist. People wanted me to blame him publicly. I spoke to him very, very directly in private. And you know why? Because we had a Canadian in jail in China. And this minister has been instrumental with me to free Mr. Garrett from where he was in China. So I had that in mind. It's not only to criticize and to yell and to speak out and you need also to have some goals and to focus on these goals and to try to make progress in this world that is not very nice and very ugly often.
Very good. And Senator Beam.
Mindful of the time, Ben, I'm just going to focus on one element of those three very interesting questions, and my fellow panelists have really responded well on all in my view. And this is on populism. When I mentioned that the German and the Canadian parliamentarians got together, our next discussion is going to be on populism, and that suggestion came from the German side. And when I was sitting in Berlin in Stéphane's job, the Pirate Party was on the ascendant and had captured seats and voting percentages. They're gone now. And as I was leaving, Pegida was rising in eastern Germany, and then the Alternative für Deutschland. So there are various movements here. We've seen in Canada that Maxime Bernier's party didn't do very well. And probably won't, but that doesn't mean that there are fringes in the established political parties who have certain views. We've not had an opportunity in this conversation to talk about social media and its impact, but it's a concern, I think, for all political parties and the way some are disintegrating, as Stéphane Dion just mentioned, or are changing, and that affects really the information that is out there. Whether you want to stick to the status quo or to a status quo you understand belongs to 30 and 40 years ago, that's one thing. But if you want to progress, that's quite another. And this pandemic puts us in a position where we really have to make some hard choices and do some good planning as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Let me just say a word about some future CIC events, and then I'll turn for a 30-second final statement from each and wrap this up at least in 65 minutes. We look forward to launching quite an extensive research program to explore some of these issues further in the year to come. We think there's tremendous potential for the transatlantic relationship as an instrument for Canada and like-minded countries to try and rebuild international order or shape a new international order. It's an opportunity we don't come across very often. And so the CIC will be working with partners to flesh out an agenda and driven very much by what could start with the bilateral relationship between Ottawa and Berlin. And so I invite anyone who's interested in the issues that we've talked to today to reach out either to the National Capital Branch or directly to us in the national office at info@thecic.org if you'd like to be part of that research project. In the much shorter term, the next big event in the CIC's calendar is called Foreign Policy by Canadians, and it's an opportunity for everyday citizens to feed into what we hope will be a reshaping of the Canadian foreign policy debate, a grassroots-led exercise. The next major topic is on security, from human security all the way to defense and intelligence, with discussions happening all day Wednesday and Thursday of this week, hosted by CIC Winnipeg. It will feature people like Christopher Alexander, who's been writing quite a lot recently on the challenges of authoritarianism and how democracies might respond. It features Alan Rock on the ongoing relevance of human security and some particular initiatives on refugees that Canada could spearhead. I invite all of you to look to CIC Winnipeg's events on November 25th and 26th for that. And with that, perhaps I'll go in exactly the same order as I did at the outset of this event, and ask Ambassador Sparwasser for the final message she'd like to leave with this Canadian audience she has before her today.
Thank you, Ben. And you summarized it beautifully. I think we should use this transitional moment, a historic moment of redefinition of the transatlantic relationship to really rebuild together the rules-based order. And just an hour before this webinar, I saw a latest Ipsos poll, and people were asked, which countries do you want to have in shaping a global order? Which countries come at the top? So 81% of people said Canada, and 78 in number, sort of in the second spot, was Germany. So I think our two countries have their job cut out.
It speaks volumes. Almost a tie. Ambassador Dion, à vous la parole.
Okay, how many seconds we have? Because I have a lot to say.
Ideally 30.
Okay. No, it's true what Sabine said. It's not the first time I see that Canada and Germany are on the podium when the people of this planet is asking to themselves where I would like to live if I had the choice. So we have a responsibility, and one of the responsibility we have, I think, is to help the countries in need. I want to say to Canada, to Canadians, that Germany come with a new strategy for their international aid approach, and it is to focus on fragile democracies, democracies under pressure. Recently, I had an opportunity to speak at a panel about Lebanon and Tunisia. Tunisia, for example, is the only country of the Arab Spring where the Arab Spring is still alive. We need to focus on these kind of countries. We need to work with the US and Europeans and to look at the map of the world and how can we focus with good strategies. Canada is focusing on women, and that's the best way to help for the development of a country and the democratization of a country is to focus on women. Water will become more and more a terrible stress for this planet. Fresh water, I think, is the issue of the century, even more than climate change. So now that the President of the United States wants to work with us fully, I think we should coordinate our approach between ourselves, developed countries, but also with all the countries of the planet.
Very good. And the final word to the newly minted chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to participate in this. I think a couple things. First of all, as I said at the beginning, we are at an inflection point, and we don't know how long this will take to overcome COVID, to refresh the economies, to promote education and to development. And I was encouraged to hear what Stéphane Dion just said about the German focus on international development assistance. The second point I would make is let us not expect too much from the Americans in the shorter term as they transition. I think that might take a little bit longer, and we are not going back to any status quo. So what this will require moving forward is a political will, a lot of conversations, a lot of collaboration, and there are no two countries that are better placed than Germany and Canada to undertake this, to look at our multilateral system. Thanks.
With that, thanks again to the National Capital Branch of the CIC. Hope to see some of you online for the CIC Winnipeg event on Wednesday and in the many events to come. Have a good day. Talk to you later.